Welcome back to Practical Parenting, the podcast that helps empower parents in the trenches, find joy in the process, and thrive through it all. I'm Christina Wales, here with my co-host, Dr. Terry Nguyen, Chair of Pediatrics at GBMC Healthcare. So on June 17th, the Surgeon General published an op-ed in the New York Times calling for a warning label on social media. We've been hearing a lot about this. Jonathan Haidt's controversial book, The Anxious Generation, came out recently. He's been seemingly on every podcast imaginable about how social media is making kids anxious. There's been discussion around social media and its prevalence in our lives. It's pretty pervasive right now, which is why we wanted to revisit this conversation. We talked about this actually on our second episode in June of 2023, but so much has changed even in the past year that we thought it would be good to revisit. So let's dive in. And before we get into sort of like, boundaries around social media and phones and kind of like what we can do, I kind of wanted to like play a little bit of devil's advocate. I feel like I've read and listened a lot to this issue, obviously being a parent of two kids, I want to be educated on the topic. And I just feel like I have some questions that keep sticking in my mind about it. And so I'll start with Jonathan Haidt's argument about social media and anxiety. My biggest sticking point with this is the idea that social media and anxiety are related to each other. The research that he used for this book it's correlational, not causational. So what I mean by that is like, they're both trending up at the same time, but there's no real research to indicate that they're related, that their rise is related in any way. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
So you're absolutely right. It's observational. That's all we have, right? We haven't done like the true research where we have a control group and we have the group that we're doing the thing to, okay? But that's really hard, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it would take a long time.
It would take a long time. And 100% of adolescents and teenagers use social media. Adolescence starts at 13, but we know that it could start even earlier, right? But that's the technical definition. So there isn't a group that you could study. So all we can say is it's observational and they're associated with each other. But remember, anxiety and depression was climbing in our teens and young adults before. It's been climbing steadily in the last 2 decades, okay? And then other things happened. There was COVID, right? From 2020 to 2023, it turned everything upside down. Social media wasn't necessarily bad. Nothing is absolutely all good or all bad, right? It's a new technology. How do we use it to our benefit, and how do we not let it take advantage of us, right? And I think that's really at the crux of it. So yes, together they're associated with, so increasing social media use, increasing mental health issues in children and adolescents. They're going up together. They had a bigger spike during COVID, and it's still continuing to climb, even though COVID is, we still have the cases, but we're not in the COVID epidemic.
Right.
So
people are interacting more in person.
Right.
Yeah.
So we don't know we don't have causational, right? We don't have any cause. But, there is correlation, and the studies over and over are showing correlations that for children who are using 3 hours of social media a day, their risk for mental health illness, such as anxiety or depression, is doubled compared to their peers who are spending less than 3 hours. And here are some of the numbers. The average usage in 2022 was that the average was 3.5 hours a day was what teens were on social media daily. As of 2023, that's risen to 4.8 hours. Yeah, and remember, you have a increased risk of anxiety and depression when your social media use is over 3 hours a day.
Interesting.
Okay? So these are associations. These are observations, There are probably other things out there also. But the biggest change in this century, honestly, is the use of technology. And technology was supposed to really help us get closer together, even if we're physically thousands of miles apart. It did do that, and it did help during COVID when we couldn't be together in person. But we took it to such an extent that some adults as well as children forgot how to interact with people face to face.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so what happened is that the social media platforms and social media and ways of connecting, through technology decreased our skills of connecting with each other in person.
Mm-hmm.
So what it was supposed to help us with, it actually, the overuse, it's always, right, we're always trying to find that balanced zone, right? And if you use not enough or too little, you're not going to have an effect. If you use too much, you're going to have more than just positive effect. You're going to have some negative effects. And I think we're on that other spectrum right now, is that there was overuse of it, right?
Which makes sense. And I think that sort of leads into my next point too, is like, I think there are good parts about it for a lot of people and a lot of kids, and obviously there are negative effects of it. But I wonder if it's, I always think of it as just a piece of a larger problem. Like in my mind, I feel like there's no way kids don't have more, anxiety and depression because of, all the other things that they're dealing with. Like the globe is burning. Like, there's shootings in schools. There's, all these other stressors that they're dealing with that we didn't necessarily think about when we were younger, or piling on top of them,
Yeah.
And they just lived through a pandemic. Like, I can't imagine that all of that is not contributing to the problem. And I feel like it often gets blamed on social media because it's sort of like the easy culprit. But, and it's not really an easy fix, but maybe for some people it's like, oh, well, we can say no phones or social media until you're 16 and that'll solve everything. And we don't have to worry about all these other things that are affecting kids' mental health. And, I don't know, I guess a cop-out is the word that comes to mind. It's like, an easy blamer.
And there's no one magic wand solution for everything, right? Each child has their own environment that they're growing up with and then there's the home environment, their social environment, their school environment. And so everything is multifactorial. I always say to my patients, when they ask, do you think this is all genetics or environment? I'm like, it's a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to say that anything is 100% one way or the other. Yeah, I think that social media, unfortunately, has threaded through many aspects, right? I mean,
100%.
You can stream what's going on in the Middle East all day long, right? And you don't have to. I mean, I know that the news agencies are streaming it all day long, but it's your choice whether you're going to connect to that or not. And I remember at my daughter's high school last October, they shut down the internet for a day because the kids were getting, the high schoolers were getting so agitated, by what was going on in the Middle East. And so when the internet went out for the school, they're like, wait, you've impinged on our civil liberties also. So that was like a quick try to fix it to decrease the focus on the war, but it actually it heightened and worsened some kids' anxiety to not know.
Yeah.
So it's about how do we help our kids and ourselves to regulate with what there is, what's available. You don't have to, like alcohol or marijuana. They're both legal. Doesn't mean you have to do it all day. Right?
Well, and, there's a little bit, like we're talking about with the balance, there's a little bit is fine. If you go a little bit too much, then it can be detrimental.
Right. So I think this is, one of the areas where people are focusing on to look at, this is a contributor. I will never, ever go out there and say, this is the root cause of why we have so much anxiety and depression. No, the world, if you just look and you open your eyes, there's so many things that are going on that would make you feel less optimistic about your life.
Yeah.
And then you add on the social isolation that everybody encountered, even introverts like myself. Got tired of hanging out with myself following COVID. Yeah. And then if you haven't settled into yourself and how you interact with the world around you, as most adolescents are still maneuvering and navigating that, that's going to increase any angst you have, whether it's anxiety angst, depression angst, self-image, confidence. That's kind of like the multi-ingredient for, a personal bomb, basically, right? So let's refocus. So, what are the things that people can actually have some control over? And I think, with social media, we can model for our kids that they can have some control over it rather than feeling so out of control, right? That's where people with mood disorders have, or people with anxiety, that's the trap there, right? You feel like things are happening to you and you have no control. You don't have a seat at the wheel for driving that car. That car has taken off, or that roller coaster, and you're just a passenger, right? But you actually do have control. And that's what I would love for us to talk about, is how do we model it for our kids, and how do we help and support them find their way through social media so that they can use it as an informed consumer, and how they will learn how to use it, like they're going to need to learn moderation with alcohol or other substances that are legal. But it doesn't mean that you should spend the majority of your day doing it or participating in it.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we're a little off balance right now.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I love that. I definitely agree that that's what we need to focus on. And I think my last sticking point that I feel like lives in my mind, and now that I have a public place to put it, I want to just kind of touch on it a little bit, because the pressure that I feel like parents are put under, or put themselves under, when it comes to this type of stuff. And I'm going to draw it out a little bit to screen time in general. The American Academy of Pediatrics says no screens before 2. And I'm going to equate this to breastfeeding, because I breastfed it was 1 year, 1 year for the longest time. I did the 1 year. I felt so proud of myself for doing it. And then they came out with 2 years. And now I am a person that does not care what anybody thinks. So I do what works for me, and I don't care if you don't agree. But when they came out with the 2 years, there is a small part of me that said, well, now I can't feel proud of myself. Well, now people are going to say you didn't do enough for your kid because you didn't go the 2 years. And I think even though I'm a person with a pretty good self-esteem, if you don't have good confidence in your parenting and you read something like that and your 18-month-old eyes a TV on the way to a different room and you freak out because they're not supposed to, I feel like it puts so much pressure on them to follow these as hard and fast rules rather as general guidelines that sort of work for your family. And so I'm kind of wondering what your reaction is to that, and like how you can basically just give parents permission to sort of like not say no to the rules, but like make it work for you that's not stressful.
Yeah. So again, we go back to, I agree with you totally. I think everything is always a guideline. So kudos to you for keeping up with the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines on things. I'm going to tell you that I think the majority of the parents out there, they're actually not even aware of that. Okay. So I'm playing the other side.
Okay.
Often they're not aware of it. Although I did have a parent request a medical necessity letter so that, to breastfeed until 2 so that she could work work from home.
Oh, okay.
And I said, this is not a medical necessity. It says we would support it. And that's the thing I was bringing out with this parent as well, is that the American Academy of Pediatrics supports that if you want to breastfeed until 2. It doesn't say you have to breastfeed until 2. And I'm actually worried as a pediatrician that if your child is going to breastfeed until 2, they're still going to count breastfeeding as their main source of nutrition. And you cannot get enough nutrition between the first and second year of life based on breast milk as your primary source of nutrition. Now, if you live in a third world country and there's not enough food, or if you're in a war zone like it is in the Middle East right now, that might be your only source of nutrition, then yes, I'm all for it. Breastfeed your child. But here we want to teach our kids how to eat. So again, it's where do we find that middle zone that works for us, right? And just as much as I'm a card-carrying American member of the American Academy of Pediatrics, I would love it if you breastfed. But I never say, when I see a mom who is really struggling emotionally and physically with breastfeeding, I would never say, well, you got to breastfeed. Actually, I'm usually the first one that raises my hand gently and says, I notice that you're really struggling with this, and I think you've given it an all, the best effort possible, and it doesn't seem to be working out as well for you and your baby together.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider, changing to a mix of breast milk and formula to decrease the stress on yourself and guilt that you have to be the sole source of nutrition?
Yeah.
It's the permission. And I love the way you said it. Yeah, I'm no holy goddess, but I am giving everybody permission to read the recommendations and the guidelines
Mm-hmm.
and then find what's working for you and your family and your child. Okay. Like there are very few AAP recommendations or pediatrician recommendations that I absolutely will stand by and say, sorry, I'm not going to nudge on this because the safety of your child, their life kind of depends on it. That would be co-sleeping under 6 months. That would be about it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to budge on that. We live where there's lots of comforters and pillows and blankets, and I've been there for families whose children accidentally, suffocated, co-sleeping in the same bed as their parents. And since we have the Back to Sleep campaign, it's really a huge reduction in accidental deaths.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about the only thing that I am like, no, I'm so sorry. This I cannot budge on. But almost about anything else, I'm like, let's see what works for you and just make sure that it's not dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And no, we don't have any studies to prove that it's totally dangerous, social media. But we also know sensibly, a child who's just developing their brain, it's just like they're trying to absorb everything that they see. Even educational TV is not very educational unless you're sitting next to your child and interacting with them. Even though you're watching Sesame Street, you have to repeat some things back. There has to be a back and forth. That's where learning happens.
Okay.
So if you plop your child in front of, the boob tube, as I call it, or whatever platform, and you expect that they're going to learn their ABCs and learn how to read that way, I got news for you. It didn't work with baby Einstein from 20 years ago. So it's about the human contact, the human interaction, combined with whatever else it is that you're using. Like if you're reading with them or they're watching an educational thing, you're interacting with your child. Same thing with social media. And, you can find some funny stuff. And I'll even recommend to my patients who are anxious, I'm like, save some really funny videos that you just, if you see it, you're going to laugh. And if you're, caught in a pickle and you're just like, your angst is like really coming up, I'm sorry, if you can laugh, that is going to melt. So I'm like, flip on the thing that says, that just makes you guffaw. So it's really about how do you modulate your use of it.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that I don't think we have had good education in doing. But there are resources that can help us with it.
Mm-hmm.
Common Sense Media is really my go-to if there's new video platforms, new technology out there, or new shows.
Mm-hmm.
I always recommend to my parents, go read what other parents are saying about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, just check it out before you say yay or nay to your child.
Yeah.
Same, when there was Snapchat and Instagram coming out, when my children were in their early adolescence, that's where I checked it out too. And then there was a social media platform which doesn't exist anymore. But as soon as you signed on, they could track your kid. And I learned that through Common Sense Media.
No,
and,
right.
Yeah, and I said, no, you don't get that platform at all. Okay.
But then you have something to discuss about it rather than just a flat no because you said no kind of thing.
So there's always a discussion,
Yeah.
right? And the other thing that we always try to encourage parents and children to do is to have a family media plan.
Mm-hmm.
What's the correct usage of it? What's the guidelines? Remember, kids do best when there's guidelines for everything.
Yeah.
Well, what are the guidelines? Are there places and times that you can use it and places and times that you should not be using it? So we're talking about media-free zones in the household.
Mm-hmm.
Bedroom is always going to be at the top of my list. It disturbs sleep. It keeps children up. Okay, and even it's pinging, even though you've silenced your notifications, there's still a little vibration or something. Okay, so it disrupts sleep, and if you don't get good sleep, nothing else really works really well, right? And the dining room or wherever you eat your family meals. Why aren't you talking to each other? Why is everybody on their phone? You're losing time to connect with each other there, and you're in person. And then, maybe there is even social media free times of the week. Maybe it's 3 or 4 hours one evening. Homework gets done a lot faster, by the way, if there is no distracting cell phone or they're often doing it on their computer. But the phone, with all of the, snaps and all that, get rid of it. And it's remarkable how much quicker homework gets completed. But you have to have them participate in the experiment.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what we observe right now. It's taking you X number of, so can we, may I suggest an experiment, and then they do it. And then when they see the difference, and that means you have more free time to do whatever it is that you want to do, okay, maybe I could buy into that as a kid or as a teen. But I'm just being told that I don't get to do it. I don't need to have my phone next to me when I'm doing homework. That's just an uphill battle.
Yeah. I like that idea of having them participate in making the rules together, because I do feel like that helps, especially the tweens and teens that like that sense of autonomy.
Yeah, they're developing their autonomy, and you want to increase their autonomy and self-direction appropriately, age developmentally, right? Age appropriately. And the thing with developing a family media plan is that you're getting their buy-in and their input. Remember way back when I've talked about family meetings? Yeah, this could be part of your, one of the projects during a family meeting is like, hey, what do y'all think about, what are the guidelines for social media use, And everybody gets to put in their thing, and then you set up a document together. Everybody signs it. And then if there are rules that are being broken, you can refer and say, hey, we all agreed to this. I see that it's really difficult for you to stick with it. How can we adjust it? Have a conversation. That's really the thing here, is to communicate about it, right? The American Academy of Pediatrics has 5 C's for media use, and I really like this, so I want to share it with everyone. The 5 C's include your child, the content, calm, crowding out, and communication. So the child is who is your child in all this? How do they react to social media? How do they use it? So this is the part where you can individualize it to your child and your family. And then the content is what is worth your attention. Remember that. And I really want to emphasize that for parents, you should really focus on reminding your children that their attention is gold, and the social media platforms, the developers are really smart. They are trying to usurp your attention. They are trying to control your attention. So they have algorithms there, right, to keep you hooked and addicted to the platform. So who wants to be controlled by somebody else? Not anyone that I know of in children.
Not any teen that I know of.
Yeah, and then not any teen. So I would put that out there. So you really want to be controlled. Your attention, which is your prized possession, okay? Only you. You're going to give your time away to X, Y, or Z. And how is it helping you? How does it make you feel afterwards, right? And then calm. So also ask your children, how do you calm down your emotions? How do you calm down and relax to go to sleep? I got to tell you, that blue screen is not the answer, right? That is, if anything, brings on more emotions, because when they've done surveys, or when the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy actually went out there and met with teenagers, quotes repeatedly where young people said, I don't feel good when I use social media. Meaning, I feel like I'm comparing myself to other people. It's really ripping apart my self-esteem. Some people are being bullied. They're feeling like they're addicted and they don't know what to do with this, okay? And then they're unable to have real live conversations with others. Wow, that's pretty bad, right? And crowding out. What does media get in the way of? Media is getting in the way of you interacting with someone one-on-one in person. Media is getting in the way of you going out and doing physical things. So increased technology is also and is associated with decreased physical activity, which has consequences on your health and consequences on like being able to go to sleep at night, right? Because if you haven't exerted your body, you're not going to be physically fatigued to go to sleep. And then communication. Remember, we talked about the communication piece. How can you talk about media to raise your child's savviness in it? What kind of response, how are they being responsible for its use? So always bring it back to them. I think if you can modulate the conversation to how do you feel about it? What does it, what do you think of it? What are you getting from it? What are you depriving yourself of when you're spending this much time on something? And then how do you communicate? So those 5 C's: child, content, calm, crowding, and communication. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has this, and they have it by age-appropriate groupings also to help you and your child navigate social media use.
Yeah, and I liked moving away from more of that heavy monitoring. It's not so much like you need to be looking at the content and things like that, but you don't want to be doing that forever. You want to teach them responsible usage on their own about the risks and dangers and things like that. It's funny, my oldest is pretty good about getting off screens, but my youngest is it takes her a little bit longer. And I thought about doing like a week of no screens just to see if we could detox. And the only reason I haven't done it is because I know that I will have to do it also. And that's going to be super hard. And so I just putting it out there that I think it's beneficial. But also if I expect them to evaluate their own behavior, I have to evaluate mine. And I think part of me is a little bit nervous to see how much I use it and to be confronted with the idea that, maybe I overuse it and maybe perhaps that's what they're seeing and, how they get into their habits on their own. So, we talk about modeling a lot, and I do think it's really, really important because we're the safe space for our kids. They trust us, especially the young ones.
Right.
And that's where they learn
I love
most
your
of their behaviors.
You have incredible self-awareness.
Thanks.
So you hit it right on the spot there, right? You're like, I'm kind of scared of doing this because I'm scared of facing my own truth. And we all are. And I'm going to tell you, like I've said before, I try to practice what I preach. So I try to experiment on myself. So for the last week, I have not really been on Instagram or Facebook. It's an active, full stop on myself when I'm about to do it. Because sometimes I do it, before bed. And I'm not posting anything. I'm just curious what's being posted, what's being said. And, at half an hour of my time evaporates. And I didn't get any benefit out of it unless I'm watching, dog videos and it makes me laugh and happy, And I find myself, I have to make a conscious effort to not go on. Last summer, I did a detox of 10 days while we were traveling in Europe. And I really didn't use it. I only used my phone to connect with my family when we were separated. But I wasn't constantly on it to find, God, whatever.
Right.
You'd be doing stuff. And I realized, wow, I saw a lot more things and observed more things that I wouldn't have had I been on my phone searching for different things, or even, you're a new spot. You want to read everything about it. I'm like, well, why don't you just take in the sight, the smell, the feel? How does it, move you with all of your senses? So this summer's experiment, it's about a week going now, is to not do Facebook or Instagram. And you know what? Some days are better than others. I'm not going to lie to you. It is hard. But it's good for me to do it so that if I suggest something to my patients or my children, oh, by the way, my children don't do any of these things, even though I do it. They're 17 and 20. I'm like, Mom's tried this. And they're like, yeah, because you're nuts. Okay. So, so at least model. And I think the modeling is going to be so imperative for the younger kids because they absorb so much by observation. Notice when they react to something, and then you telescope out and go, oh, is that how I react? It's a good chance that you've reacted in that way in a similar situation.
Sure, yeah.
And that's where they got it from. It's not to bring on guilt. It's to just remind ourselves that what we do really gets imprinted in our children, right?
I'll tell you a little story. So my oldest is 6, and this has been a couple months, but I asked her to do something, or I said no, and then she said, if you don't do this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And I said, excuse me? We don't threaten each other. And she said, you threaten me all the time. And I was like, you know what? I do. Not in like a,
right.
But those, I need you to do that. If you don't do this, we're not going to be able to do this. But it really makes me pay attention to my phrasing.
Yeah.
Because she picked up on it and is using it against me.
You were giving a consequence. Mm-hmm. Please do this, and if you can't do this, this is the consequence. That's how we see it.
There are better ways to phrase it if you take the time to do it.
Right.
That are more connection-based and, curiosity. There are just better ways to do it.
I wonder how I would frame that or reframe it, right?
Yeah.
And, those moments actually are very poignant and so filled with like learning. If you're being curious and wanting to learn from your kids, you're like, whew, right in the face there, right?
Yeah.
And there's no bigger motivator than when your child is mirroring something back to you that you do that you might not really like. That's going to change your behavior. So this also brings us back to this topic is so rich.
Yeah.
We're both really like pumped about it. And it's because I think it brings in everything. It brings in the collaboration between parent and child, the open communication, what do you bring to it with your child, right? And then it's modeling. You want to change your child's behavior, you're going to have to change your behavior first. And I think I've said it in different ways throughout our podcast.
Oh, yeah.
But I really think that's the crux, right? If you want a child change your toddler's behavior, you're going to have to change yours. If you want to change your adolescent's behavior that you find to be kind of irritating or pesky, you're going to have to change your behavior. And what it may mean is that you change your reaction or your non-reaction to it.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And they will then also catch on to it subconsciously, and they'll know that that's not a point that they can nudge you with.
I did want to touch on one subject or one point also. We've been talking a lot about balance and, engaging in conversation around this and doing kind of what works best for you and your family with maybe some suggestions on how to get those boundaries started. But if parents are wondering if this is normal or a little bit over the top, can you kind of outline what you would consider an unhealthy relationship with social media, like what that looks like, how it shows up, particularly in teens, that you've seen?
I'll see examples. How's that? You're waking up to it. It's the first thing you flip on. It's the last thing that you do before you go to bed. You're talking with someone and you're also you're glued into it. It's like an accessory to a body part that it actually isn't. It's something separate, but you've seen this in some children and young adults where it's constant. They're talking to you and they're still on their phone. They are doing homework and they're still on their phone. And I'm going to smile and say, I have one of those young adults in my house. And sometimes it gets to be too much. And I say, you know what? I've really noticed this. Do you think you can put it away? Can we set like an hour or 2-hour limit on it? And it goes away for a little bit. Or if it gets too much and, my young adult really, can't be without it, I am not proud of it, but yes, I've been known to take it away. My husband and I'm like, okay, if you can't control yourself with it, then we're going to have to help you. But, I know that's just the easy way out as a parent, okay? All right? It doesn't solve anything because that means you had you were doing the controlling action. Your young adult didn't. What you might do is like, okay, share the observation and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. We're not even having a conversation. We haven't had a conversation with you in how many days? What do you think we should do? So start at that point, okay? Start at the point where you can draw them in and say, well, what do you propose we do? And then they might say, okay, I'll stop it for half an hour. And you're like, well, how about an hour? At least the conversation gets started and the ball is in their court as a start rather than you having your own agenda and saying, this is what I want. But I owned up to sometimes I just can't take it anymore. I'm like, your face is always in that phone. You know, you could be in the same room as us, but you're somewhere else. And I'm too tired today to parent well, so I'm just going to take it away.
But I mean, giving yourself some grace. I feel like you would be that way if it was your husband too. If you were trying to have a conversation with him and he was constantly in his phone, you'd probably have the same reaction.
Right.
You know.
Right. But we're human.
You probably wouldn't be able to take it away quite as easily, but
well, I request, I would request nicely. I'd be like, really, honey, do you need to have your phone? I'm like, so here's the compromise though, right? Like, I always feel like I have to be on call because often I really am.
Right.
But I'm not going to have it at the dinner table. I'll have it on the counter on the far side in the kitchen. So if it goes off, yes, I'll look at it. But it's not an automatic that I'm looking at it every 5 minutes.
Just to make sure.
Yeah. I'm like, really? I mean, and if I miss a call, you know what? Someone's going to call me right back in 5 minutes. I mean, because that's really the reality of it, right? So you have to be able to model control over yourself with whatever it is that you're talking about in order to model it. And you started this out with what's an unhealthy use of it. It's really all the time. It's always present. It's like an accessory. You go to the bathroom with it, And yes, we have put limits on our young adults in our family. Like, you don't need that to go to the bathroom. You do not need your cell phone in the bathroom, because then you're in the bathroom for half an hour. I have no idea what you're doing. I'm really thinking you're not that constipated, and make fun of it. If you can just try to find the reframe to add humor to it, it breaks the tension.
Yeah.
And remember that, whatever you come to the conversation with, if you're tense and you're like this, guess what? That's what your child, your young adult sees, and they're going to bring it right back to you. So if you can just at least settle into a neutral zone before you approach that difficult conversation, something that really irks you, I probably wouldn't do it the minute you walk in from work. This is a reminder to myself, okay? I'm like, why is everybody on the phone when I walk in? Why is the only person who greets me without a phone is the dog, So remember those things. And then, okay, if that's not how you want to be treated, that's not how you want to be greeted, then you're also going to have to do some changes on yourself. So the change starts with you. And I feel like that's something that my parents might have said or I've heard ever since I was little, but it's becoming even more evident as time goes on for me. Like, I desire so much for that person to be different. And then I'm like, wait a second. You have no control over your child's actions or reactions, but you have every control over how you present it and how you react or not react to it.
I love that you brought this up because I feel like that was me until I hit my 30s. And can I just tell you how freeing it is to not put that on yourself? Yeah. Like, how freeing it is to just say, that is your stuff. It stays in your tennis court. I have my own tennis court, and I'm going to stay over here and do my thing. Yeah. And that's what it is. Very freeing.
It is very freeing. Yeah. No, I agree with you. This is why we jive. So, any last dying? I
mean, I think you said it. This is a really complex topic. It's lots of different, nodes and places we could have gone with it. But I think we touched on a lot today. And so, sometimes I feel like it's our generation that didn't quite get a handle on social media or phone use because we were sort of like in the middle of when it was developing. And, it's hard to teach your kids something that you don't necessarily have a grasp on or whatever. But I think this conversation has showed us that modeling and working together and communicating and building things together is really, the source of how we're all going to sort of navigate this complex topic. So let's just keep on learning and keep the conversation going about it.
Absolutely. And, I wanted to say one last thing. You said you were scared of doing a social media detox. I actually heard that. I'm like, that's a great way to introduce it to your girls, actually.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you say it, right? You're like, hey, I really want to do this, and I'm kind of worried that I'm going to find out some truths that I'm not really, do you want to help, Mom? So how can, what do you think we should do? Like, these are my observations. What do you think?
Yeah.
And then they'll give their input, and they might tell you some surprising things.
They would love it.
Yeah. But then they're engaged,
Yeah.
right? And then so what can we learn together? But that's it. You have to bring out your vulnerabilities, your deficiencies, things that you're working on for them to know that, oh, yeah, Mom has it too. And she can be honest about it. And and she wants my help in doing this.
Yeah.
And so what's that going to reflect back is that if I have difficulty with something, maybe I could seek her advice on it, right? When it's always the other way around and they're always feeling trapped by what we have to say about what they're going to do, no wonder they get tired of listening to us after a while, right?
Yeah.
Because it's always our agenda. I spent a good part of an appointment today talking with a parent, and I saw myself in that parent. And I said, you know what? Your child is 13. I'm going to tell you as a doc and as a mom, you need to sit in the passenger seat, zip your lips, close your eyes, sit on your hands, and enjoy the ride. Only step on the brakes if your kid, you, or somebody else is going to die imminently. But otherwise, you get to zip up and sit there. And the lessons that they learn through their own mistakes and their trial and error are the best lessons for them. So, same here.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you in the next one.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.